Welcome to the Endo Belly Girl podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Chavez. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner on a mission to change the way that we support women with endometriosis. Endo is a full-body disease that impacts your mind, body, and spirit in countless ways that aren't often addressed the way that women truly deserve. We are here to talk about all of it. Please keep in mind that the content of this show has been created for educational purposes only and should never be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis or treatment. Hey, my friend, and welcome back to the Endo Belly Girl podcast. This episode is for you if you feel like you're always bloated and you just don't understand why. Maybe you've tried cutting out what you've been told are trigger foods, you've tried supplements like probiotics, and you're still left looking 5 months pregnant by the end of the day. So what gives in this situation? Is this just endo doing its thing, or is it actually an underlying issue with your gut? Today, we're going to be looking at the difference between endo bloat and gut-related bloating and why, for many of us, it's not either or, it's both. So first, let's take a look at what endo belly actually is. So endo belly, if you haven't heard this term before or weren't really sure exactly what it meant, basically it refers to that distended belly, that big bloat that happens. And oftentimes women even complain of looking 5 or 6 months pregnant because that belly is so very bloated. So the symptoms that come with that typically look like that abdominal distension, pain, pressure, all of that. Now, endo belly often is cyclical, meaning it often happens during certain phases of your cycle, especially the second half of your cycle post-ovulation, which is the luteal phase, but not always. It can show up a little bit differently for different people. It can also just be unpredictable, and it's thought to be due to an increased sensitivity of the wall of your intestine, because studies have shown that patients with endometriosis show a reduced stretch pain threshold of the intestinal wall, comparable even to people with IBS. That's directly from a study I found in PubMed. The gut connection that I think is important to talk about when it comes to that good old endo belly is that many people blame endo belly purely on endo. So let's talk about that. Let's unpack that a little bit. Because what I want to ask you is, okay, we know endometriosis comes with a lot of symptoms, right? Besides just the pain, which of course we know not everybody with endometriosis even experiences pain. So it shows up certainly differently for everybody, and we associate a lot of the gut-related symptoms to endometriosis. Absolutely. But I will say that actually looking into the health of your gut, I honestly find to be often overlooked. I've been working in private practice for years now, seeing one-on-one clients who are struggling with endometriosis, and pretty much every person who comes to me is struggling with gut issues of some kind or another. And studies have even shown that upwards of 90% of women with endometriosis also have gut-related symptoms. So there's obviously a big connection that's happening here. So some of the things that I see in my practice that can contribute to that bloating, besides endometriosis itself, is the lack of enzymes or HCl in your stomach, dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the bacteria or other microbes that live in your gut, SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, so an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine. Leaky gut is another thing where there's damage that's happened to the lining of your gut that allows for more immune reactivity. And those are really some of the big things that I see. But if you want to really dive into all of that and what that looks like, definitely go and check out one of the recent episodes, episode number 76, which was titled Hidden Causes of Bloating That No One's Talking About. I will link to that one in the show notes if you'd like to go dig a little more into those underlying causes and see what that's all about. But some of the signs that some of those things I listed might be an issue include changes in bowel movements, so that can be constipation, diarrhea, loose stools, Also symptoms like gas, burping, heartburn, indigestion, bloating after eating, and like anything, that list that I just gave really just scratches the surface. Honestly, many gut-related symptoms, as well as symptoms that don't even seem directly related to your gut. Things like the health of your skin, the health of your mental health, right? If you struggle with depression, anxiety kind of symptoms, that can actually relate to your gut as well. There's so many things that relate to your gut health besides just the direct gut symptoms. Now, let's talk a little bit about endobelly and IBS. So IBS is irritable bowel syndrome. Many of you may be familiar with that simply because so many women are either A, misdiagnosed with IBS when it's actually endometriosis, or B, actually have both endometriosis and IBS. Now, if I'm perfectly honest, I actually struggle a little bit with the label of IBS, the diagnosis of IBS, because really it's kind of a catch-all phrase for a wide variety of different gut symptoms. You've probably even seen on commercials where they advertise certain medications for IBS-D, which is IBS with diarrhea, or IBS-C, which is IBS with constipation. So even the way it presents itself can be completely opposite for different people. So I just want to mention that first. And also, IBS and endobelly can present themselves honestly very similarly. So let's take a look at what the difference often is. And again, this is kind of on a case-by-case basis because it may not look exactly the same for everybody, but this is kind of the general picture of the difference between endobelly and IBS or other similar gut-related issues. So endobelly, like we talked about before, is primarily connected with your menstrual cycle and the presence of endometrial-like tissue that is in your pelvic region, which is really the definition of what endometriosis is. Because the presence of that endometrial-like tissue can cause some of that hypersensitivity in your intestines, right? Because your intestines aren't really intended to come in contact with tissue like that. And so it can cause some aggravation and irritation, which can lead to that inflammation, which can lead to that bloating. And we do often see more of that during that later part of your menstrual cycle because that's when some of those hormonal cyclical changes are happening. Now, when it's purely IBS, you're often going to see digestive symptoms like abdominal pain, changes in bowel movements, bloating. Those are some of those common symptoms, which again, you can see there's absolutely some overlap between the two. That's why I wanted to record this episode today to kind of outline what each one looks like and how to know what's going on in your body. Endobelly usually worsens during that time before or maybe even during your period. It can easily fluctuate with hormonal changes, whereas IBS or just gut-related bloating can often respond to triggers like food, stress, gut motility issues. And gut motility, by the way, if you're not familiar with that term, is basically the speed of your food that you're digesting moving through your GI tract. So if it's too fast, the gut motility is fast, that equates to diarrhea, loose stools. If your gut motility is slower, that typically presents itself like constipation, and bloating can come along with that as well. And here's really the key of today's episode. So if you're like me and you're often multitasking while you're listening to an episode, this right here is the moment that I want you to come back, focus in, and really listen because this is the key part of today's episode. And that is, this is all connected. So I know, I kind of falsely lured you in here because I told you I was going to tell you the difference between endobelly and bloating related to GI issues, but the really at the heart of the matter, there's a lot of overlap because the root of those issues is very intimately connected. You really can't separate them. It's all connected. Honestly, the more I learn about health and how our bodies work and the functional approach and all the things, the more that I recognize that you really can't separate one piece of your body from another. It's one whole human, and looking at how all the pieces interact is really what matters at the end of the day. So, How is this all connected? Let's take a look at that a little bit. I want to use an example because this is an example that is really important, particularly when you have endometriosis, because as much as I talk about endometriosis being primarily an immune system dysfunction, right? And when we have an immune dysfunction, that's going to equate to that chronic inflammation going on in your body. However, that doesn't mean that the hormones completely don't matter. I know we've talked about this before on the podcast. Because estrogen absolutely does still add fuel to the fire when it comes to endometriosis. However, coming back to that whole idea I just mentioned about nothing really being completely separate in your body, estrogen and your gut health, really just hormones and your gut health, are intimately connected. You really can't separate them. And I'm going to give you an example of what that looks like. So if you are constipated, if you have that slow motility where it's taking too long for your food to get from your mouth back out into the toilet, when that motility is slow or you are constipated, what happens is that the estrogen that had been circulating in your body, let me actually rewind a little bit and explain to you how all of this works, because these are things we're just not taught typically in school. So estrogen, of course, is one of your sex hormones. Most of you are probably familiar with estrogen. Estrogen is primarily used as a growth hormone, so it helps the lining of the uterus to grow every month. And that's oftentimes why we see estrogen imbalance when it comes to endometriosis, because that same hormone can connect to the growth of that endometrial-like tissue in your gut. Now, the way that our bodies create these sex hormones, they're built in the ovaries, and then it's kind of a use it and then lose it situation. And that's what you want. You want to create hormones, you want to use them for their purpose in the moment, and then you want to get rid of them. You don't want them just hanging out in your body. So how does that work? Well, the hormones end up getting delivered to your liver, and your liver breaks them down and packages them up in a way that they can safely be eliminated from your body. And then those hormones are then pooped out into your toilet. And so if you are constipated, if your motility is slow and things aren't moving along like they should, what happens is that some of that estrogen that had been circulating and had been pulled out of circulation by the liver and packaged up and been delivered into your colon to be pushed out of your body, literally, is then hanging out too long. And some of it can end up being reabsorbed into your system, and this can cause issues. This can definitely help to build up that excess estrogen dominance type picture in your body. So you can see just right there, and that's only one example, but definitely an important one of how your hormones and your gut and endometriosis and your gut are very intimately connected. Now, we're not really here to talk about hormones today. In my head, I have like 14 more things to say about that topic, but that's a topic for another day. That's the gist of it. I just wanted you to see a little snapshot of why your gut and hormones are so intimately connected and how everything in your body really is connected, right? Because at the end of the day, even just inflammation in general is very, very connected to the health of your gut. If someone's coming to me with symptoms of inflammation, which typically includes primarily pain and fatigue, does that sound at all familiar to you as an endo warrior? Think about that. The very first place that I'm going to look is your gut, and here's why. Inflammation, when we hear that word, what that really means is it's your immune system at work. Hey, my friend, I just wanted to take a moment to speak directly to the version of you who's maybe listening right now while unbuttoning your jeans because the bloating has already kicked in. If you're dealing with that swollen, painful, can't get comfortable kind of bloat, the kind that makes you feel like your body is working against you, or you're just tired of being bloated every single day and having no idea why, listen up because this is for you. I've created a brand new free live workshop called End the Endo Bloat. because so many of us have been told to just cut out dairy or try probiotics, but that barely scratches the surface. In this workshop, I'm going to walk you through what's actually driving the bloating that comes with endo and what you can do to end the bloat once and for all and feel more like yourself again. If you're ready for some real answers and real relief, come join me. It's all happening on Monday, June 9th at 4:30 Pacific Time or 7:30 Eastern Time. It's totally free and there will be a replay if you can't make it live. Head on over to www.endobellygirl.com/bloat. That's www.endobellygirl.com/bloat, BLOAT, and I'll see you there. Now let's get back to the episode. Inflammation is your immune system at work. That's how our bodies work. Your body senses an issue of some kind, it sends out alerts, and your immune system comes in to take care of that. And when that system is kind of going haywire, there's some dysfunction happening, hence why I always say that endometriosis is primarily an immune system dysfunction. That's where we see inflammation. Now, what does this have to do with your gut? Well, fun fact, about 70 to 80% of your immune system lives in your gut. So if we're wanting to support inflammation, we're wanting to support your immune system, that means we must support the health of your gut. Plus, we have to look at why endometriosis is actually developing in your body in the first place. And again, that means that immune system health is a huge part of this. All right, other areas of overlap that I think are important to note as well. Food sensitivities and intolerances. We haven't talked a lot about that, but that can be a huge contributor to inflammation, right? It can damage the lining of your gut. That's when we run into that leaky gut issue, which we'll dig into deeper on another day, leads to more immune dysfunction, all of that. Also, if you have some imbalances happening in your gut, meaning we all have, just to give you kind of the brief overview of what this looks like without getting too sciencey, living in your colon, which is your large intestine, there are billions and trillions of microbes. And the whole of that is known as your microbiome. Your microbiome is filled with bacteria and yeast and parasites and all kinds of little tiny critters that live in your gut. And I know that sounds kind of scary and creepy when you think about it, but primarily they actually have benefits to our bodies. They actually help us to break down foods that we can't digest on our own, and they actually create byproducts that are very beneficial for our health. However, there are different types of microbes. Some of them are really beneficial for our health, like I just mentioned, and some of them are really detrimental to your health and can instead lead to more inflammation, can exacerbate symptoms, can cause bloating, can cause changes in your bowel movements. And so when there's an imbalance, there's more of the bad gut bugs than there are the good gut bugs. That's what we call dysbiosis. And just that alone, can lead to hormone imbalance. There's actually a whole sector of the microbiome that's known as the estrobolome, which is basically looking at how some of these microbes interact with estrogen. Super interesting. Again, I could go super in depth on that today, but this isn't intended to be a super sciencey episode. I just wanted to give you the idea of how all of this works so that this makes sense to your brain, right? So often we hear little pieces of information without being able to really put it all together, and that can just end up leading to more confusion. So I want you to leave this episode being able to really understand it. If you need to even go back and listen to it a couple times, great. Now, we talked before about motility, how fast or slow your gut is moving things along. And when that motility is slow, that can actually exacerbate dysbiosis. It can make it worse. And at the same time, dysbiosis can also exacerbate motility issues in either direction. Dysbiosis can contribute to constipation or diarrhea, or sometimes it goes back and forth, right? Maybe you have both. One of my lucky friends. Now, why would your motility be slow? That's a question that I hear a lot of. Or maybe that's just my brain. I'm always looking at the root cause of the root cause of the root cause. So why might your motility be slow? Well, it can be related to the dysbiosis directly. That's why sometimes it's important to clear up infections. It can also be related to a lack of enzymes, HCl in your stomach, bile. It can also be related to your eating habits, your diet, your stress, and the health of your nervous system. So many things can actually impact your gut motility. All right. I feel like I ended up packing a lot into that episode. I tried to keep it as concise as possible, so it's broken down in a way that is understandable for you. So hopefully that was helpful for you. But the real conclusion, again, if you've kind of tuned out and you're multitasking, once again, come back. This is the key takeaway from this episode that I want you to bring with you, which is that you can't fully separate endobelly and GI-related issues. They're so intimately connected and bound up with each other, that you really can't fully separate them. And that, my friend, is why I like to take a holistic approach to health. That's why I really like the functional approach to health. Now, holistic doesn't just mean, by the way, crunchy natural stuff, although there's some of that too, of course. But what it really means is taking a step back, zooming out, and looking how your whole body works, how the body systems fit together. And when we're talking about the functional approach, what that really means is that we're working alongside the functions of your natural body, which means we have to understand how your body's functioning, how it's currently functioning, and what optimal function looks like. And then we're working to get you from point A to point B. And that's really the gist of what I do every single day in my work. And I love what I do, which is why I like to show up for all of you every single week. And can you believe this is episode 91, which is pretty nuts. I'm almost to 100 here. Pretty crazy. Thank you for coming with me on this journey. So, what does this mean for you? What that really means is that getting to the root of what is actually going on in your gut is incredibly important. So, how do we do that? My personal very favorite way is a functional test called a GI map. The GI map is a stool test. It's done at home, and it's basically it's an at-home test kit where you collect your own sample. I know, whole lot of fun, but really it's not that bad. You ship it back to the lab, and we get back the results. And that GI map is a very comprehensive stool test. So if you've had your stool tested in a doctor's office before, typically they're going to be looking at just a handful of markers. Maybe they're looking for certain types of bacteria or yeast or something along those lines. It's generally fairly basic, for lack of a better word. I actually just recently had a client bring me some test results that her doctor had done. He had run a stool panel where they were looking at, I think they had maybe 4 types of bacteria they were looking at on the stool sample. And then they also ran an H. pylori breath test, which is looking for a type of bacteria that lives in the stomach. And all of that had come back negative. And so now she's coming to me trying to look to fill in the gaps. And that's something that I hear all the time. So that GI map, it basically shows all the things when it comes to your gut health. It's a nice little snapshot of what is going on in your gut. So it shows us some good information on your digestive function or dysfunction. We can see how your body's doing with enzyme production and how well your body might be doing with producing digestive juices like HCl and bile. There's not really direct markers of that, but we can certainly look for clues. We're absolutely able to look at your microbiome and what's happening there. If there's more of the good gut bacteria or bad gut bacteria, we can even look at specific types of bacteria that can impact certain areas of your body that influence certain pieces of your health, which is super important. And we can even look at markers related to the health of your immune system and inflammation and some of those pieces that we talked about in today's episode. So it's something that I use, honestly, with pretty much every single person in my one-on-one practice. We just get so much out of it, and I've seen so many positive results from working through the results of that test, from bloating being gone for good, better health with your bowel movements, better skin, less pain, less fatigue, better fertility. I mean, so many positive things. Definitely a lot of changes in the hormone health. So many things can come from just supporting the health of your gut. So I did want to take a moment to introduce you all to something that I have going on right now, if that sounds like something that you would really benefit from. So I'm now offering that GI map, that gut panel, plus a 1-hour consultation with me to review that panel and get personalized results and interpretation of that test is now available. And it's going to be a limited time thing. Of course, I can only offer so many of these as well. So it's a limited time / limited capacity kind of offer, but I'm going to be offering this now. It is available through Monday, June 16th, if you're listening to this in real time. If you're listening to this later, don't fear. You can still visit this particular page of my website I'm going to send you to, and you can see when it might be available next. So from now through Monday, June 16th, go ahead and visit www.endobellygirl.com/gut-clarity. That's www.endobellygirl.com/GUTCLARITY. And I will link to that in the show notes as well. It's definitely something you don't want to miss out on. You'll get so much information from this that can really fill in some of the gaps that you've been missing over the years in your endo care. And honestly, if you've been thinking about doing some functional work on your health, but you just maybe are a little intimidated or unsure of where to start, this is a really fantastic way to start because it allows you to get some information without a huge upfront commitment. So it allows you to just get a glimpse of what areas your body might need support, so you can see where you might need to go from there. And I think that is something can be so helpful for people. All right, my friend, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time on the Endo Belly Girl podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today, my friend. If you loved what you heard, be sure to share with a friend and subscribe so that you can keep coming back for more. If you are ready to take the next step towards getting to the root cause of your endo symptoms like endo belly, pain, fatigue, and so much more, you need to download my free ultimate guide to building your own endometriosis diet. You can find the link in the show notes or at www.endobellygirl.com. Until next time, my friend.